pleased to be having another episode of a technical version of the family business with the gentlemen who have founded VenoStent, Tim Boire and Geoff Lux. I've been following your company for a while, and I'm thrilled to have you on. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. It's
Yeah, it's a
an
pleasure.
honor.
Yeah, I was friendly with Mike Nagel, who's one of your board observers, for a long time. And so when I saw there was a connection, I called him right away to say, I've been seeing these guys over the last year or so gain a fair amount of traction. And he was going on and on about how brilliant you guys are. I don't know how accurate that is, but he certainly seems to think so. So what I'd love to do is take the first minute, and each of you, you can, Tim or Geoff, you guys can choose who does a better job of giving a bit of a snapshot of what VenoStent is, so people understand the context of the technology, and we can get into the fun stuff of how this all came to be.
Take it away, Tim.
Sure. Thanks, Geoff. The company was a spin out from my dissertation research at Vanderbilt University in biomedical engineering in 2017. I had worked after undergrad, worked for 3 years at a Genzyme biotech company, joined biomaterials tissue engineering lab in 2011, and that's where I was tasked with developing this new shape memory polymer, a novel biomaterial. And over the course of that, in 2014, did the NSF Core program, and that was really informative to figuring out sort of the proper application of this material, and then further engineering of it for the purposes of supporting that use. And so we looked at hemodialysis access, and that was a clear unmet clinical need, and it seemed like a great opportunity. And so pursued that for the rest of my dissertation, and then Geoff and I linked up when I was finishing my PhD and he was finishing his MBA at Vanderbilt.
So let's pull that string a bit. How'd y'all meet?
Yeah, we met through a mutual mentor of ours, Jim Mansour. He's actually an active board member of ours now. Yeah.
It's funny how that stuff happens. It's, the whole ripples in a pond thing. You never know who you meet is going to introduce you to someone else. Usually it's not that person, but it's someone that they know. And it's amazing how it happens, whether it's, your personal life or professionally, that you happen to take a class, you happen to go to a mixer or whatever it is that you go to when you're working through your dissertation, and boom, look what happened here.
That's how it happened. Yeah. For us, like Tim was a mentor for Tim. And then for me, it was, I was doing some work, it was like, and basically an internship kind of thing for credit. It's part of an MBA, pretty classic, wouldn't think it would have materialized in anything like this, but Jim is a great person, and knew both Tim and I personally and our intentions professionally. And so, yeah, it ended up working out quite well.
Should give a little credit to Vanderbilt. When I got my MBA, I remember learning the concept of a cluster and how important it is to get the right people in the right space at the right time, and then all kinds of magic happens. So does the school perpetuate it? Because it's such a terrific university. We looked at it for my daughter, and she really wanted to go. It's a terrific school. So I'm curious if the school does anything to make sure that this happens.
Yeah, it is a terrific school. I think for me, just had a lot of opportunities, had supportive, mentorship, and, I was able to participate in that NSF Core program in 2014. I think that was really the beginning of these types of opportunities. And then, yeah, it was really, really neat that, Vanderbilt had some focus towards innovation and entrepreneurship. They had all kinds of things going on campus. It's the Tech Venture Challenge. That's actually when I first met Jim. I was like helping to organize that effort. Is like the Life Science Tennessee Academic Alliance. And then there's a business course, Innovation Realization, Marie Thursby established out of Georgia Tech and brought to Vanderbilt. And that was really helpful to like have my dissertation and then have like 2 MBA students, 2 JD students be part of that. And then Geoff, and then Geoff and I, we just so happen to have like very mutual interests in terms of, wanting to do a healthcare startup company. So, and Jim was our connection point there. And Jim was very involved in the ecosystem. So there's just a lot of, people very active in the ecosystem. And I think more and more they're developing more programs at Vanderbilt. They have all kinds of things going on there now. So
So that begs the question, how do you wind up in Houston, the two of you? You're both in Nashville at the same time, right?
Yeah, yeah, we got into Health Wildcatters Accelerator Program in Dallas.
Okay.
That's what brought us to Texas to begin with. And so that was a way to pursue the company full time post graduation, without any other income. So then in 2018, we were looking at the end of that program, where do we go next? We were able to raise a little bit of money from that program, like an angel investment group out of Fort Worth, Texas, Cowtown Angels. And then we're looking at Houston because, there's chief of vascular surgery there that was interested in collaborating with us on grants and other things. And then, and he was a key opinion leader in the field. And then we had a Rice professor and grad student also that were 3D printing experts and bioengineers, and they're in the process of developing spinning out a company themselves, a 3D printing company. And so we needed to develop a 3D printing process for our material in order to have real manufacturing capabilities for our device, for our applications. So a lot of things fell into place there. And then J Labs, wet lab space, and the TMC accelerator program was a good little ecosystem for us to join.
Yeah, it goes back to your point, Matt, about, for school, it's also for cities where we're putting the right people in the right place together at the same time. Couple small anecdotes. That chief of vascular surgeon that we were collaborating with, the Tim's, spoke of in his first leadership, he's one of our key opinion leaders as a physician in one of our clinical sites and actually one of our PIs for our large RCT right now, randomized controlled trial. So it's the same fella from, basically day one of the company, so 2018, and now currently doing procedures in people, which is pretty neat and exciting.
He's a national PI of the study.
National PI, right?
Really?
Yep. And
Huh.
and then as far as like the other, that those fellows who are the Rice, Rice professor, the 3D printing company, we've actually, been working with them formally or informally for years, and now have some former collaborators and coworkers of theirs working for us. I'm still very close with those folks. So it's it's kind of a small world, and just keep those, friendships and colleagues and professional acquaintances warm, because it's been, some serious continuity there.
You never know what will happen, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
Listen, I mean, you guys have been the epitome of making good use of every relationship that you have. I mean, it's funny at my daughter's bat mitzvah. I remember trying to explain to her. I had everyone stand up when I gave my speech. I said, if you look through a kaleidoscope, that would be you. And so for you guys, if someone looked at you through a kaleidoscope or through a mosaic, they would just see all these faces of all these people that have been a part of what you've done. It's really extraordinary. And that's a story that I love to tell to other startups, to say, look, every relationship you make, you never know where it's going to lead, and whether it's now or 5 years from now. You guys have had some tremendously good news as of late. And so I'd love to talk about the fundraising piece. I know you raised a large portion of it last year and finishing up this year, in addition to the grant. So if you could give a little bit of insight to folks who are looking to get their Series A, like what is it about it you think that got you over the hump?
Yeah, it wasn't easy or fast, so it was a process and that we began, I guess in 2023, like early 2023 or 2022 even.
Yeah, I think it's 2022.
Lose track of the years.
Right.
But I think the biggest thing for us was having these regular investor updates, continuing to make great progress with the company. So we thought we were going to be able to raise the A around our breakthrough device designation. And we were able to get that in early or May 2022. So we thought that would be enough, but actually we needed ID approval, which didn't come till May 2023. So, it was a challenge, but it's a matter of just like continuing to push forward. And then with those regular investor updates, there were investors that were excited about the progress that we were sharing and wanted to invest sooner rather than later. So they decided, hey, like let's get something done now. So we were able to raise actually on favorable terms, while we were raising the Series A. So we weren't in a desperate situation. So you want to make sure you're treating your investors right, keeping them updated, and
Right.
yeah.
How often would you say you
lab
sat with them? Is it
Sorry,
monthly,
what was the question?
quarterly? How often do you sit with the investors?
quarterly.
Yeah, quarterly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So I would just to quickly add to that. Sorry for interrupting, but like bit of advice, if I, if I may, we, as Tim mentioned, we thought that the breakthrough designation, if I recall, I was even thinking it was like we had a first in human trial that went really well, and so when we
Right.
were discounting, our future capital raises, we thought, once we get such and such data from our first in human, assuming it goes well, this is like forward looking at the time, we would be able, then we'd be able to raise our A, right? So we have, 6-month data, 12-month data, whatever it is from our first in human, that would be sufficient to raise the A. And the breakthrough, of course, as well. That turned out not to be the case, right? Investors wanted more certainty around our regulatory pathway, and they were right because our regulatory pathway changed over the course of time. So that certainty, would have been, it was a wise decision on those investors' behalf. So as far as advice goes, if when you're in your seed round, like raising your seed, in the process of burning, spending it, have a really good idea of what investors in your space are going to look for, like pretty precisely, in order to be able to pull the trigger on an A, because we had misconceptions, and thankfully it ended up, all's well that ends well, but those misconceptions could have been deadly.
Well, look, you're dancing with the right people. Good Growth is fantastic folks. I've met Sam Schofield, and I've been back and forth with Amy Salzauer a bit, and they just do
Yeah.
phenomenal work. I don't know Norwest as well. I imagine the relationship is solid there too, or they wouldn't be playing in your playground. But what's that like? In other words, do you reach a certain point with them where you feel like the relationship is solid? Almost like when you're going to marry somebody. Is it like that when you just say something just happened, we've clicked, I feel like we're on the same page now?
Well, I think having your current investors really bought in and with enough, chops to speak to other investors. So for us, IAG Capital came into our seed round, and they were huge for raising the Series A because they had some relationships with Good Growth. And then, it was sort of just right place at the right time. Good Growth had just raised another, the beginning of another fund. So we were able to get something done with them where they were actually the outsider pricing the round, and they could co-lead a deal with IAG. So yeah, I mean, you establish these relationships, and there's a certain level of trust built between you for sure. Like, you're very appreciative of them for what they've done, the things that they provide. And honestly, it's felt organic. It hasn't
Yeah,
been
exactly.
difficult to cultivate anything. They're bought into the company, and we appreciate them, and they appreciate us. And I think that's a great place to work from.
Now, what do they think? And I don't even know if I'm supposed to ask this, but so you tell me. What do they think when they see you getting creative, going for NIH grants? And I know you all have another grant, the SBIR, and you've done things through the school. And I think Y Combinator, and there's some other people you've been talking to. Are they excited that you're being resourceful, or are they, hey, listen, I thought we were
Yeah.
dancing?
I mean, the accelerator programs were for us just a way to broaden our network. So that
Okay.
Y Combinator was the last accelerator we did. That was in 2020, and that was a great opportunity for us because you could raise like a small round before the Y Combinator program, with them understanding that the valuation will probably go up with these West Coast investors, and the great progress that you're making, and then able to raise the seed after that, Y Combinator. But in terms of like the non-dilutive funding, you want to make sure it's not a distraction, right? And that it's actually aligned with the company goals and objectives. You're not like working outside of that to just get some additional funding that's not that useful. For us, we had a very clear next step being this large randomized controlled trial that we needed funding for, and the NIH grant was to help support that. So this is kind of a great synergy of things. So from an investor's perspective, it's great because it's free, not free money, but it's non-dilutive funding that you can leverage for achieving what you need to achieve, extend that runway, right? So have more resources. So everyone's excited about that, but yeah, it should be definitely towards the company goals directly.
So the technology itself is extraordinary. Like my family has considerable kidney disease in it, and so whenever I see something like this, I always just lean in a little bit harder than I do with some other indications. And so, give some idea of the numbers involved here. How many patients is this from a patient population standpoint that are we focused on? I want to get a general idea so people understand what the market cap is and how impactful this can be.
Yeah. So starting from like the top side of things. So, 1 in 8 people in the world suffer from chronic kidney disease. Okay. That's a huge number of people.
Yep.
Of course, not as many progress to the point of requiring dialysis or kidney transplant to sustain life. So typically there's 5 stages of chronic kidney disease, and we're primarily at the end, stage 5. But there's others, stage 3, stage 4, maybe a good idea to undergo a fistula to avoid any use of the catheter. So we, and so there's about 500,000 Americans with end-stage renal disease, and there's about 500,000 Americans that are relying on dialysis to sustain life each year. So that's the relative patient population. In terms of like the number of surgeries, you look at the incident number of patients that are end-stage renal disease, and that's a little over 100,000. But then you think about all the prevalent patients as well that have failed access sites, either failed catheter, failed fistula, failed graft, and they need to undergo an additional arteriovenous fistula creation surgery. So we estimate about 150, 200,000 or so surgeries would be applicable for. And the way our technologies it has been conceptualized and put in the field, we think that it can be applicable for essentially any type of fistula creation.
I was stunned at the numbers. 60% failure rate in the first year for an AV surgery. I mean, it's sobering, is what it is.
Less than
It is.
less than a coin flip's chance of success, right?
Yeah.
And that's full failure, right? That's not number of interventions to get it working. That's like not usable in any capacity for dialysis. So yeah, it's quite high, right? Less than a coin flip. Go in there for a procedure and you think to yourself, okay, it's less than a 50% chance that this is going to work first time out. It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So that's why, back to the, market or whatever you want to call it, like, number of procedures and how we're actually positioning the technology for patients and for our investors, and everybody else. This is a prophylactic treatment, right? It's the failure rates are so high and it's so universal essentially that there's very few like contraindications that you would actually, not give this to a patient for, right? So it's essentially, we're hoping to establish a new standard of care for AV fistula creation across the board, right? There would be very few cases where you wouldn't give it to a patient who is having an AV fistula created, which speaks to the problem, but also obviously the market.
Right. And just breaking that down further, it's like there's about 39% of these surgeries done in the US that these fistula creation, it's direct artery to vein connection surgery in the arm to support dialysis treatments. About 39% fail essentially right off the bat. They do the surgery, they're never used for dialysis, period. But then there's another of the ones that do mature, which is like 61% or so. About 30% of those also have failures within 12 months. So that's why we talk about cumulatively about 50 to 60% 1-year failure rates. And so, yeah, it's pretty bad. And that speaks to the problem, right? It's clearly that veins are not built to be arteries, be strong and elastic like arteries. They need some mechanical support.
It's funny. when you're not a scientist like I am, and you just want to know what's best for the patients, you look at it from a almost like a child's perspective, and the fact that you have the cells growing outward instead of inward is such an interesting concept for someone who really is not technical. So
Right.
I don't know what your impetus was on thinking all this, but it's absolutely brilliant. And you know, anyone I think with a fifth grade education can understand that stenosis, and it gets to be a smaller and smaller tunnel for the
Right.
blood to flow through. So I'm curious about that. Was that part of this aha moment for you, was being able to do that, or what was the eureka for you?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like an entire, like most scientific innovations, it wasn't an entirely new concept. So
Okay.
we had looked at other, when I was doing my like PhD, looked at other like review papers and other works where they used other materials as these perivascular wraps, things that go around the vein. A lot of times they're focused on like bypass grafting surgery or something like that, rather than hemodialysis access. But there's a mixture of things done in the field, even dating back to like the 80s. But the materials that were used weren't the right materials. They were like Teflon, or they were like some stiffer material that wasn't porous, like they didn't have it all together. And so I think that's where Venustin came into being, was combining all these different things. Because a lot of times, if you're an engineer, you think about things from like a truly just a pure mechanical perspective. And then if you're like a biologist, like you're thinking about, the molecular biology, the biochemistry of things, like this signaling pathway. But it's like, okay, how do we marry these things together in a way that's going to work best for this application? And so that was really combining these different things, and then testing our materials in an early like mouse study, seeing that interestingly it can induce this outward remodeling process. You call it like neovascularization, new microvessel formation. The pore design can be tweaked to promote more of that, while limiting some of the fibrosis that occurs. And so we've been able to do these types of studies, first at Vanderbilt, and then more thoroughly, or I guess it was done thoroughly at Vanderbilt, but also like, I guess across more industry relevant, in the sense that we've compared it to like other FDA approved materials and whatnot. So anyways, it's been a combination of different concepts, and then testing it and optimizing it, and then coming up with some of our own theories. Yeah, like we think we've cracked the code in some way to perivascular wrapping, with this approach that combines these different things. And you want enough mechanical support, but not too much. And so that's where I think we've learned a lot from just looking at this from, the bench side, the fluid dynamics side, the animal study side, as well as in the clinic. So it's been a fun decade.
Yeah, listen, it's clearly impactful. It's going to change the lives of these patients and their families, because dialysis is one of those things that affects everybody. It's someone's got to get
The
them
lifestyle,
to,
yeah.
yeah, they got to get them to their dialysis center, or they have to do it at home, and some of the patients are older and they can't do it. I did a lot of work with Outset Medical back in the day, so
Oh yeah.
did a fair amount of dialysis then, and I know what goes into that.
Yeah.
I'm curious about one other technical piece, the bioabsorbable side of this. Like, how long is it in the body?
Mhm. Yeah, so we have uh, engineered the materials to have certain thermal, mechanical properties, and then also the degradation profile. So we have, that's kind of what's unique about our approach relative to other materials, is that, some people were using like really fast degrading things, or they were using non-degradable materials. And we think the right approach is something that's slow degrading, because especially in these patients, you'd be concerned about, okay, you have a foreign body there. You don't want to induce some inflammatory response that's, very aggressive and chronic, or just aggressive period. So With our approach, it's something that provides this mechanical support, which, you know, impacts the fluid dynamics. It also promotes this outward remodeling process. And then it slowly gets integrated into the surrounding tissue. So, you know, we're talking about, you know, a time course of years where it's just slowly degraded until it's no longer needed.
What's the next, if there even is one, application for this? Because I imagine you're already thinking about what else you can do with it.
Yeah, so even starting back at, you know, the NSFI core program, I mean, the first obvious thing is to look at applying this around arteriovenous grafts, because that's it's a synthetic material that goes between the vein and artery in the arm, but it's the other most common form of vascular access for dialysis patients. So we've already done a chronic large animal study showing a significant reduction in this stenosis. So we're planning to look at that as an application. We think that would be impactful for the market to have a solution that can apply for both fistulas and grafts for hemodialysis patients, but then also in bypass grafting. So we had an NIH grant to support some testing in a disease chronic rabbit study. So we showed a significant reduction in intimal hyperplasia there. So we've been able to show this across multiple animal models, and now, you know, it's a board discussion in terms of like how you roll that up, because you want to be laser focused on getting this thing to market. But maybe there's other non-dilutive funds that you can leverage to pursue, you know, some initial clinical studies in those and broaden your indications.
You know, the short answer is basically any time a vein is used as a replacement artery, right? Theoretically, have to be careful what we say, you know, because this is all research at this stage, but there are millions of surgeries globally at some level that are using, you know, veins replacement arteries. So coronary bypass grafting, peripheral bypass grafting, you know, AV grafts, AV fistulas, so quite a few.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I'd been doing some work with a trauma company, vascular trauma, and they were talking about the difficulty with
Hemocyte?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
I work with those guys, and I'm blown away by them. And the concept of some patients don't have an hour to do the vessel harvesting or the vein harvesting. They don't have it. And so having something that's more readily available, or having something that's easier for the doctor to use, or whatever the case may be that makes it life-saving, is only going to improve.
Right.
Yep.
So I got I guess a bioethics question. I figured, Geoff, you're the right guy. I've never met anyone with a master's of bioethics, but
I love ponderous questions and even more ponderous answers. So let's
there you
hear
go.
it.
You come to the right guy. So I have this theory that handling success is harder than handling failure, and I'm curious from I don't know if bioethics, I'm just defining it right,
Yeah,
but
sure.
you start thinking about, okay, we're having some success. We just raised a significant amount of money, and now we have to meet those expectations. And so everything gets accelerated. We start hiring more people. We start, you know, and you guys are running a clinical trial now. You have all this going on. How do you make sure that everything stays on the rails from an ethics standpoint? You cannot cut any corners, even though you're having all this success. And I don't know if it's hubris or something happens when you start having all of this good things happen to you. I'm wondering how you manage all that to make sure, hey, look, we still have governance on everything that we're doing. Let's do what we've done to get us here today.
Yeah, so it's you know, if it's a question about success, you know, maybe I'll give it a couple of years and I can answer that question. But you know, and I also don't know, you certainly don't need a degree in bioethics to answer this. You know, we have, I think, well, this is actually very pertinent to you. I think the first thing you do is you have a team of people that have the same values as, you know, as yourself, ideally those values being good ones. So, you know, you work hard, you're able to question your superiors. I'm doing air quotes here for listeners. You know, intellectual honesty, all that kind of stuff. And you hope that if you surround yourselves with the right people, once again, that kind of decency and humility and all that stuff percolates to the top as a matter of course of business, right? And I think we've gotten really lucky with a great team of people from our very first hire. Um, there's been a couple of missteps along the way, of course, like every company, but that's probably the first thing that I would say is that you try to surround yourself with decent people. Tim and I also, I think, have similar like moral values, philosophically, religiously, all that kind of stuff. That we, without proselytizing on a podcast, we hope to, carry through with our professional lives as well. So, I just think it starts with the team, and if it ends up being successful, then that philosophy will been the right one, hopefully. But I'll let you know when we
Yeah.
get there, I guess.
It's not without its challenges, right? There's so many moving parts, but it's a matter. Yeah, like Geoff said, the team is really the most important.
Well, it perpetuates itself by your behaviors and then the initial people that
True.
you hire that are closest to you. Because when you're brand new and you're hiring your first 5 to 7 people,
No
you're usually
kidding.
going to hire people who are very similar to yourself. But when you get the next 20, it starts to expand like a pyramid. And then
Totally.
if those next 5 or 7 are great, the 20 behind it will be fine. If the next
It's
5 to
such a
7 are not
yeah.
like you, it doesn't trickle down.
It's a challenge. I will say it is a challenge. Like all ponderous answers aside, like, we're still a relatively small company, right? We're 22 people, 20 people. Right? It's pretty small, but all these things, you're sliding people in between people that were normally direct reports and all that kind of stuff can be challenging for sure. Um, yeah, I don't have a good answer beyond that. I'll just say that like it's definitely like it had. I think again, it's got to be a culture. It's a cultural thing too. Like you have to be able to question each other and be honest with each other and all that kind of stuff.
Right. You have to
Yeah.
go back to that culture, and we try to be very transparent and open door policy. That's what everybody lists is what you like about management.
Right.
So we definitely try to be that, and we care. We just genuinely care
Also,
about our
we
people.
have a lot to be humble about, right? Let's be
Yeah.
honest. Like
Yeah.
we're still pretty,
Yeah.
new and young at this. So, yeah, and also like to mention, like we've had some, back to Mike Nagel who introduced us, Matt, like, and some of our board members, like there's some people that have done this before. So whereas our team is relatively young, um, you know, we're surrounding ourselves with some of that experience too to help us avoid some of our pitfalls. Or, one of our kind of corny lines is like one of our superpowers is, learning from other people's mistakes. So we, that helps from surrounding yourself with some good people, above you or,
Well, it
in
also
the board
comes
level.
from listening. There are some people who see someone else make a mistake and they figure I could do it better instead of
Yeah,
letting someone else
that won't
touch a
happen to
hot
me.
stove. Yeah, I know.
Right,
I'm
right.
in that bucket too. I
Yeah,
definitely
certainly.
gravitate towards people smarter than me all the time.
Yeah.
Well, look, I don't think people who aren't familiar with the company won't know like how amazingly it's going from a startup standpoint. Trial going on, breakthrough designation, IDE, round of funding, grants. I mean, those things are stacking up brick on brick of a solid foundation. And I'm thrilled for you guys because this is, as you said earlier, an enormous need for patients. Even if you just stay in hemodialysis and you don't go on to the other graft
Yeah.
items you were mentioning. I mean, it's pretty heady stuff that your
It is.
first startup out of the gates is already starting to gain some traction.
Don't jinx us, Matt. No, okay.
Nah, man, I don't believe in jinxes.
No,
I
no
mean,
kidding.
Matt, yeah, we don't either. Matt,
Yeah.
it's been that way since the beginning,
Yep.
like in terms of like the company, just to have that, like, and that's really what informed the initial path of the company. It's like, this is clearly, and I'm like, there's so much passion around this patient population, around, the surgeons, the nephrologists. It's like such a problem. And of course the patients and their families, and hearing their stories, it's very touching and it's inspiring. So it's really cool to be, and I think that's how we have unity as a team and a company, really, is that everybody understands what we're working for. So it's a blessing to be, in that position of doing, I think, something noble and meaningful, and at the same time having fun and growing a lot professionally and personally.
Well, that definitely gets lost in the shuffle when you talk about culture is enjoying coming to work. Like, I've been here for 22 years, and I'll tell you what, I never mind Monday, and on Friday I'm a little grumbly. It's just the way it is, and
Yeah.
you could ask anybody who's been here a while. We all have the same kind of feel. It's just just love what we do. It's because
Yeah.
of the culture that we built here, and we hired for, just like you guys are saying, same thing.
Yeah.
And we did it here. Well, look, I had a feeling y'all would be informative, and I love perpetuating how great this industry is when you're showing people like you, throwing yourselves at it, and look at the result. You moved to Texas and you created all of this with a ton of help, of course, but it still has to be the two of you staying up until the middle of the night doing this, God knows how many times, dealing with hurricanes and whatever else you're dealing with. It's more than impressive. So is there anything else that you'd like to cover at this point? I want to make sure I've given you all the platform that you can handle.
Yeah, I mean, just for the startups, you know, to just keep on keeping on. You know, it's keep controlling what you can control. You know, probably hear that all the time, but that was probably the most meaningful advice I heard as a grad student. To really, like, you can make so much progress without, you know, figuring out letters D through Z, right? You can do ABC, and you can get something meaningful. So just keep working on the things that are most important, and you know, keep moving, be proactive.
Yeah. I would just say to Tim, yeah, it's well said. And then also, something thought about over the years is I think people, in some sense, overestimate the level of like risk that goes into doing these companies. It's like if you're able to, if you have a good idea, a couple good people, that kind of thing. If it doesn't work out, it's not like you're going to debtor's prison. If you can get a little salary and you can take care of your family and you can take care of the things that you need to, and do the bare, do the minimum financially to make yourself like not go in the poorhouse, all that kind of stuff. Like, there's no guarantees in life, right? Even with the steady, boring, jobs, air quotes again, there's layoffs and there's, people, corporations, change their headquarters and suddenly, those jobs don't exist anymore. And I just think like, founders especially get a lot of credit for like taking these big risks, but sure, it's a risk, but the early employees take as big a risk too. And frankly, I can't imagine being a first or second employee in a startup, right? Those people take a risk on the founders and all sorts of other things. So anyway, I think it's, if you've got enough financial buffer, if you've got an idea that you've been working on, I think, don't overestimate the risk, I would say.
Yeah, listen, it's coming at you no matter whether you recognize it or not. I mean, risk is it's pervasive.
It's a risk worth taking.
Yeah,
right,
absolutely.
exactly.
Absolutely. Well, look, thanks so much for joining. This has been the Family Business Technical Version, where we met the founders of VenoStent, and they've done extraordinary work. Keep an eye on the company. If the momentum continues with what they're doing, they're going to be changing lives. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you.